Need financing for a vehicle or financial assistance with late auto payments? Don't have the money to your rent or mortgage? Need financial help with utilities? And also, would you want to receive cash back rewards for paying bills? Visit our friends at financialservicessolutions.com, where you can get an array of packages that will fit your needs, from monthly investments to virtual wallet accounts. You get debit cards, you get an array of services, and you can pick between 4 different packages. Visit our friends at financialservicessolutions.com today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I know I've been getting a lot of messages about this executive order from Biden about the police. Now, I'm going to say up front that this executive order doesn't affect you at all. And I'll go through it, why I point this out, why it really doesn't affect you, or it's like basically it's nothing. It's nothing. It is nothing. This is Biden and the Democrats trying to throw us a bone, because we have said he don't even give executive orders, or well, now he gave one. But it's kind of like with Biden and the Democrats when it comes to black people. You remember they always said that you never make a deal with the devil, because the devil got his fingers crossed behind his back. Those of you that grew up, in my age range, they used to say that a lot. Never make a deal with the devil, because he's always going to screw you at the end. But let's go through it and let me show you why this really don't apply to you. All right. So 2 years ago, the murder of George Floyd exposed for many what, ladies and gentlemen, what's the first thing that we see right off the bat that spells trouble? For many, what black and brown communities have long known and experienced. Now, you start off with George Floyd. George Floyd wasn't so-called brown. And once again, who are brown? Well, what is brown? I don't know what brown is. I know who black people are. There's no classification of people in the United States of America called brown. What is brown? We told you anything that say black and something else, we don't accept it. We know there's something wrong with it. Okay. Politically, you have to be very specific with it can't be black and LGBT. It can't be black and brown. It can't be black and Asian. It can't be black. Every time it's with black folk, it can't just be black people. George Floyd happened to, that's black. Breonna Taylor, black. You know what I'm saying? Michael Brown, black. Everything black. There's no, I don't know who the brown people are. So I'm not even going to go there, right? I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to justify that term brown. This is a Democrat talking point, brown. I'm not brown. You're not brown. Talking about as classification. Okay, I know all of us have brown skin. Yes, we do, but that's not what they're doing politically. All right. That we must do more to ensure that our nation lives up to its founding promise of fair and impartial justice for all. That's not the founding promise at all. I mean, you go back to the nation's founding, when they was writing that so-called Constitution, my people was enslaved. So they didn't write that with my people in mind. Now, they say the incident sparked one of the largest social movements this country has ever seen, with calls from all corners to acknowledge the legacy of systemic racism in our criminal justice system and in our institutions more broadly. 2 years ago to today, nothing has changed. So what is he talking about? He said today President Biden will sign a historic executive order to advance effective, accountable policing and criminal justice practices that would build public trust and strengthen public safety. Say police cannot fulfill their role to keep communities safe without public trust and confidence in law enforcement and the criminal justice system. Yet there are places in America today, say, where the bonds of trust are frayed or broken. Say, to heal a nation, we must acknowledge that fatal encounters with law enforcement had disproportionately involved black. Here we go. Involve black and brown people. Okay. It says President Biden's EO will enhance public trust by promoting accountability, transparency, and the principles of equality and dignity in policing and the larger criminal justice system. It's an increased trust makes policing more effective and thereby strengthens public safety. Without that trust, victims do not call for help. If the witnesses do not step forward, crimes go unsolved, justice is not served. The EO mandates measures for all federal law enforcement agencies leveraging. I want you to pay attention to this. The EO mandates all federal law enforcement agencies. I want you to see that part. Federal law enforcement agencies. That's very important. And I'm explaining to you why I'm harping on federal law enforcement agencies. Leveraging the president's direct authority over the executive branch, the EO also requires the use of federal tools such as guidance on practices, best practices, training, technical assistance, and grant making to support reforms at state, tribal, local, and territorial law enforcement agencies that will strengthen public trust and improve public safety across the nation. So he says here that you can get grants, so some money can be given out to support reforms. Okay, just to support it. We're talking about the state level, tribal, local, etc. Okay, that's important too. Now, it said promotes accountability. Creates a new national database of police misconduct. It say the EO orders the Attorney General to establish a new law enforcement accountability database in which all federal law enforcement agencies must participate. The database will include records of officer misconduct, including convictions, terminations, decertifications, civil judgments, resignations, and requirements while under investigation for serious misconduct and sustained complaints, or records of disciplinary actions for serious misconduct. And say as well as commendations and awards. Say the database will have due process protection for officers. And say all federal agencies must use the database in screening personnel. It will be accessible to state and local law enforcement, administrators, they say, who are encouraged to enter their records as well. Listen, at the state level, they can use it and they are encouraged. They encouraged to enter their records. They're not demanded. Okay, this is very important. I'm going to point this out. The Attorney General will make aggregate data by law enforcement agency public and will assess whether and in what form records from the database may be accessible to the public. Okay, so you may think, man, that's pretty good what Joe Biden is doing. You know, man, that's awesome. But this is the key. This is the key word. All federal law enforcement, you have to do it. But when it comes to the states, okay, when it comes to the states, which the states is the one that's more important. The local PD, which is more important, okay? That's the ones that affect you. He says all federal agencies must use the database in screening personnel, and it'll be accessible to the state and local. So basically, if your state and local police want to get access to seeing who these people are, they can. But it's not a requirement for your state and local law enforcement agencies. Okay? In other words, this does not do anything for the state and local law enforcement. Most of your local law enforcement is the ones that's killing black people. It wasn't the state police in Minnesota that did that to George Floyd. It was the local police there in Minneapolis. It wasn't federal law enforcement agencies that killed Corrin Gaines. It was local police. It wasn't federal law enforcement agencies that killed Philando Castile. It's local law enforcement agencies. Do you see the trick bag in this? He said that the local police can use it, but they're not required. The problem is the local police, not the feds. How many federal agents have you seen just shoot an unarmed black person 100 times, 50 times, dogpiling on them? How many federal agents have you seen do this? We don't see it like that. Because usually when the feds come at somebody, usually got their ducks in a row, usually. Okay? That's what normally happens. Now, so far, this executive order doesn't mean crap. It doesn't benefit locally what black people deal with. So that's a trick bag that we're seeing with this already. Now, strengthens pattern or practice investigation. The EO requires steps to improve the investigation and prosecution of criminal civil rights violations, including directing the issuance of best practices for independent investigation and improving coordination to address systemic misconduct through pattern or practice cases. It ensures timely and thorough investigation and consistent discipline. It the EO requires federal LEAs to adopt measures to promote thorough investigations and preservation of evidence after incidents involving the use of deadly force or deaths in custody, as well as to prevent unnecessary delays and ensure appropriate administration. Once again, the key word is federal. What affects you is local. This does nothing. This is a waste of time that Biden filled out. Once again, federal agents isn't arresting brothers, and you see all these in custody deaths with federal agents. That's not what you see. It's these local police. You understand what I'm saying? Which one's always getting caught being white supremacists? The local police. I'm not saying they don't have them at the federal level, but it's more of them at the local level. You understand what I'm saying? So continue. Mandates of adoption of body-worn cameras. The EO orders all federal law enforcement agencies to adopt and publicly post body-worn camera policies that mandate activation of cameras during activities like arrests and searches, and provide for the expedited public release of footage following incidents involving serious bodily injury or deaths in custody. Once again, federal. What affects you is local. You understand? All right. Raises standards, bans the use of chokeholds and the court order restraints unless deadly force is authorized, and restricts the use of no-knock entries. The executive orders all federal, not all. Now, if it would have said the executive orders all police, whether you federal, state, or local, then I'll say, okay, well, Biden halfway trying to do something. But the more he keeps using the term federal and not local, that doesn't affect you. To adopt policies that ban chokeholds and court order restraints unless deadly force is authorized, and restricts the use of no-knock entries to a limited set of circumstances, such as unannounced entry would pose an imminent threat of physical violence. Requires new standards that limit the use of force and require de-escalation for all federal agencies. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a federal bill. This is a federal executive order. It's federal. Federal. It does nothing for you. Once again, all the killing of black people happens at the local level. The local level, not federal. Okay? I came to say it's a norm for state police to be doing this either to black people. I mean, I'm not saying it don't happen, because it has, but most of it happens at the local level, and this does not do anything other than give money to the local police if they want to do reforms, and give them access to this database. That's it. Okay, so the EO orders all federal law enforcement agencies to adopt use of force policies with requirements that meet or exceed those in the DOJ's updated use of force policy, which authorizes force only when reasonably effective, safe, and feasible alternative appears to exist, authorizes deadly force only when necessary, and emphasizes de-escalation. The policy also imposes a duty to intervene to stop excessive force and a duty to render medical aid. Federal law enforcement agencies must conduct annual training on those policies. Implement risk management tools to facilitate appropriate interventions before problematic behavior escalates, and ensure accountability for policy violations. The policy is publicly available on the DOJ's website. Once again, federal doesn't affect you. This is the problem with this executive order. Okay? Restores and expands upon Obama-Biden administration restrictions on the transfer of military equipment. So the EO imposes sensible restrictions on the transfer of purchase with federal funds of military equipment that belong on the battlefield and not our streets. The list of prohibited equipment is broader than under the Obama-Biden administration. The EO's mandate is broader than the George Floyd and Policing Act. In that it permits to all relevant programs, not only to the Defense Department's 1033 program. The EO continues to ensure that state and local LEAs can access and use appropriate equipment for disaster-related emergencies, active shooter scenarios, hostage or search and rescue operations, and anti-terrorism efforts. Now, he specifically had talked about here, state and local, right? Talking about getting this military equipment. Okay. But notice that's the only time he's saying they can access it and use it, for disaster related active shooters, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Now it says support law enforcement, improve systems and training. It requires an updated approach to recruitment, hiring, promotion, and retention of law enforcement officers. Now it said the executive order requires federal LEAs to develop the best practice to attract, support, and retain an inclusive, diverse, expert, and accountable law enforcement workforce, including by implementing screening tools to ensure that agencies do not hire, retain, or partner with on task force individuals who promote unlawful violence, white supremacy, or bias. On the basis of protected characteristics. The working group will, also will identify ways to expand mentorship and leadership opportunities and ensure that performance evaluations and promotions are tied to an officer's adherence to these policies. Once again, federal. What we need to see is state and local. Once again, that doesn't benefit black people whatsoever. Okay. Reimagining crisis response. They say the EO directs the Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services to issue guidance and identify federal resources for innovative models to respond to a person in crisis, including co-responder and alternative responder models, community-based crisis, and post-crisis care. It also orders guidance on the use of pharmacological agents such as ketamine outside a hospital setting, as it prioritizes officer wellness. Now, say the EO directs DOJ and HHS to publish best practices and standards to promote officer wellness and to identify resources to support wellness programs. It requires each federal LEA to access and improve its own officer wellness program. The Attorney General must also recommend measures to the President to help prevent after consultation with HHS stakeholders. It requires new standards, for accreditation and for accrediting bodies. Okay, so the EO requires the Attorney General, after consultation with stakeholders, to formulate standards. That means stakeholders. That's interesting. Why are you consulting some sort of stake? Who is these stakeholders you're talking about? That's interesting. He put that in there, ladies and gentlemen. To formulate bodies, standards for bodies. That accredited law enforcement agency. Those standards must include that the accrediting body requires policies consistent with those of the EO. That the accrediting body conducts independent assessments of agency compliance rather than rely on the agency's self-certification. The Attorney General must also incentivize and support agencies in seeking and obtaining accreditation, including through grant making. Okay, has nothing to do with us. Implementing new evidence informed annual anti-bias training. So it basically is telling you about that here. As you can see, just a module about implicit bias, yada, 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 same old. But once again, federal LEAs must conduct that training annually, implement procedures to respond meaningfully to complaints of bias, and reassess 2014 guidance on use of certain protected characteristics by law enforcement. Once again, that's at the federal level. It's not at the state. It's not at the local level. Okay. So once again, it doesn't do anything to help at all. Now they talk about tracks data on use of force incidents. Say within 6 months of the date of this executive order, all, once again, federal, LEAs must collect and submit on a monthly basis all data of incidents involving deadly force are compiled by the FBI's use of force data collection. The Attorney General must also facilitate the contribution of this data, as well as data by officers killed or assaulted. By, I guess it means state and local and tribal, I guess here, LEAs, and report to the President his plan to fully implement the Death and Custody Reporting Act. Okay, so they're saying that they got to do this on the state level too. Okay. That's what they say. It's not a suggestion. They say they just want to report on that. But it's no in here talking about punishment. And most of this stuff is talked about at the federal level. Okay. You're talking about doing a study on the impact of use of force incidents on communities. So, okay, as you see here, he wants a study, with the review of physical, mental, and public health effects on the use of force on communities, including, disparate impacts, outline available resources. He's doing all that. I'm not trying to bore y'all reading every part of this. It says safeguards the use of facial recognition. So as you can see here, directs the National Academy of Sciences to conduct and publish a study of facial recognition technologies and other biometric technologies and predictive algorithms that assess any privacy of civil rights, civil liberties, accuracy, or disparate impact concerns. It said with their use, it said the study will then be used to make necessary changes to federal law enforcement practices. Once again, doesn't affect you locally, doesn't even affect the state police whatsoever. Okay, so I'm just letting you know that enhances data collection and data transparency. It said a working group will write a report to the president on how to collect and publish data on police practices, including calls of service, searches, stops, frisks, it says seizures, arrests, complaints, law enforcement demographics, and civil asset forfeiture. It's saying on the practices and policies governing the acquisition and use of advanced surveillance and forensic technologies, not reforms. Okay. It's a direct a government-wide strategic plan to propose interventions to reform our criminal justice system. Let's say a new committee with representatives from agencies across the federal government will produce a strategic plan that advances front-end diversion and say alternatives to incarceration, rehabilitation, and reentry. The Attorney General will also publish an annual report on resources available to support the needs of persons on probation or supervised release. They're talking about improving conditions on confinement. They talk about that here. You can kind of go see that. Requires full implementation of the First Step Act. It said Attorney General will, instead of the DOJ policy, is necessary to fully implement the First Step Act and to report annually on implementation metrics, including an assessment for any disparate impact, of the pattern risk assessment tool and steps to correct any disparities. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, this is nothing. This is nothing. This is nothing at all. This will not affect the local police. The local police can actually get a grant from this. They can have access to the database, but this doesn't do anything. Biden and Democrats on this, like I said, see, let me say something about that. They used to say something about black people a long time ago. If you want to hide something from black people, put it in a book, or put it in the bill, or put it in an executive order, and we can hide things from black people. Well, that doesn't work anymore. We got the internet. We can read your bill. We can read your executive order. And then we could come back and say if it's good, if it's bad, if it's a waste of time, whatever, right? And my overall assessment of reading this not even worth the paper it's written on, because federal law enforcement agencies aren't pulling black people over and gunning them down unarmed. Federal law enforcement agencies, they just had a brother by the name of Jalen. Oh my God, I forgot his last name. I'm working a story on this brother. Hold on, what's his brother last name? Jalen Randall. There we go. Out of Houston. They say he allegedly had some warrants, and he was getting out his car. Cause they say he kind of took off from him, but he decided to get out the car. They tell him to put his hands up. While he trying to put his hands up, the cop got out the car and just shot him. Why are you trying to put his hands up? Kill a brother right here in Houston. Now, nothing that Joe Biden is talking about would apply to that. Nothing. So Joe Biden didn't do anything. And if you notice, it was no talk of qualified immunity, was it? No, because y'all have to understand something. The police is the enforcement wing of white supremacy. If they don't give them the unlimited ability to kill, then they cannot run this system. They would listen. This country would never have police reform based on voting, based on asking. Okay, black people have never gotten anything in this country. Just look at our history. We have never gotten anything in this country by voting and by asking. That never happened. We never got the limited civil rights that we have by voting and asking. That's never how black people got it. Black people got it by putting foot to the pavement and other things that black people have done. I always got to be careful on what I say here, because when you have this microphone, it does bear responsibility, and you have to be wise as a serpent when you start speaking on some things. But black people never attained anything through voting. They will never give black people equality in this country. That's not what they want to do. You have to understand, white supremacy wouldn't even work without black people, because black people have been chosen as the group to be the permanent underclass. And who are you going to be supreme over if you don't have a permanent underclass that you have chosen? You understand? Other groups have been chosen as the permanent underclass. Black people is the choice. So I'm going to cover on the next podcast, the Great Migration. Not the Great Migration itself, but I'm going to cover how the white supremacists responded at that time period when black people was getting the hell away from white supremacist terrorism. I'm going to cover that, because if you understand how the white supremacists move, it makes me understand certain things that's going on today. And I'm going to take you to how they also thought about black people connecting with other black people globally, and why that was also a problem at that time period. I'll cover that, because I guess I just understand the white supremacists and how they move. And I guess maybe at times I have a little bit more forward thinking to see some things, ahead of time than maybe some people, but I want to share those things with people that really maybe just have it in the back of their mind. And they kind of been, I'd say, I've been thinking that, that's most of the people that I try to reach. I don't think my message all the time is for the masses. I had to figure that out, because a lot of times the masses can be easily swayed, or unfortunately in the black community, the masses can't see past a year. A lot of times that's our biggest problem. We don't have forward thinking. We don't have forethought. We don't have it. Most of us are a today people. And this is why we stay losing, because if you do not plan for the future, or you don't try to see where will you live, or whatever you need to do, if you can't see 5, 10, 15 years down the line and make certain moves to make things happen in a certain way, or even see where your people is going next 5, 10, 15 years, then that's why we stay in trouble. See, white folks, what they do that. They try to plan for the next 50 years, right? Some of the people that's making plans for 50 years not going to be here, but they making plans for their people and where they need to go. So I'm going to go through that, what happened to our ancestors during the Great Migration. Now, some of our ancestors did leave the South. Actually, 47% of black people left the South. But I want to cover what happened when 47% of black people left the South. It's very, very interesting how these white supremacists responded to that. So to wrap this up, executive order doesn't do nothing to benefit you black people at all. He's not really talking to you because he said black and brown. You make sure to point that out. Everything is at the federal level, federal. So Biden tried to do this to get y'all to vote. Didn't work too well, Mr. Biden. Didn't work too well. The finesse, like I said, we read today. We read. And I think the most dangerous thing is black people who read, right? But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on the podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe. That way you know exactly when we post another podcast. Make sure you click the like button. The like button is very important. It lets the algorithm know that, hey, they are engaging with this video, and we want to spread it to other people. We need black people to listen to these podcasts. We're trying to give y'all some pertinent information on these podcasts. So share it with your friends and family on your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever your friends and family is at that need to know these situations. Just share it with them and say, hey, go subscribe to that page and you can hear the rest of the podcast yourself. Also, like I said, if you enjoyed the show, leave us a love offering. That we greatly appreciate that. And make sure to join our channel memberships. We implemented that across the board on all platforms, just as an incentive for people who are members. They can comment during live streams or premieres. Everybody else can comment, after the fact. That's fine. But we wanted to make sure to give that perk to the members that are supporting the channel. So we appreciate you coming by, and see you next time.